Hey everybody, Paul Gentrick here, checking in with today's topic, which is how to win in a multiple offer situation. We're going to discuss things you can do to differentiate yourself as a buyer in a multiple offer situation. We are in first quarter of 2021 and the market is off roaring. We've got very low inventory. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Paul Gentrick. I've been a realtor for coming on a decade now, serving predominantly the northwest side of Chicago, the North Shore, and the northwest suburbs of Chicago. So again, today we're going to discuss how to win in a multiple offer situation. So let's jump in. First thing, in a multiple offer, we're going to assume that you know you are in a multiple offer situation. There's different ways you can end up in a multiple offer situation. Sometimes you may not know that you're going to end up in one, and so the approach can vary. But we're going to discuss this in terms of, let's say you found a home, you love it, you're ready to make an offer, and we're going to start 10% below asking price, and then you find out, well, there's other offers on the table. That lowball offer that you were thinking about doing is probably misplaced. So you find out, okay, we are in a multiple offer situation. The agent representing the seller has announced that the seller would like the highest and best offer by a certain date and time. And so we're working under those parameters. One thing you need to understand in with any home that you're buying is what is the market like at any given time or in that specific time for that type of home that you are looking to purchase. So the important thing there is what's the supply, what's the demand like? If you figure we've got one house for sale and there's 5 buyers looking to buy that house, they're going to be competing for that one house and they're probably going to be driving up the value of that house. Now, if you flip things around and there are 5 homes and only one buyer, they've got homes to choose from. So you got to understand the seller's perspective. Even in a multiple offer situation, they may be a little bit more motivated to sell, knowing that there's going to be other homes that the buyer may move onto if they can't put a deal together there. So in this instance, we are assuming that we are in a low inventory environment where we've got that one house and we've got the 5 buyers competing for that one house. And so how do those 5 buyers differentiate themselves, or how do they look to the seller? And what makes them different? What does the seller see? What do they perceive about those buyers? And that's, I think, what we're trying to do is dive deeper into that and to give you an idea of how you can differentiate yourself. So I do work with buyers and sellers, and so from the seller's aspect, I deal with seeing how buyers approach multiple offers and also guide a seller through how to dig through those offers, how to figure out what the difference is between the offers and where the probability is highest in terms of which offer will likely net them what they want. Is that money? Is that a closing time frame? Is that successfully closing on the house? So understanding all that is key from a seller's perspective. And since I work with sellers and buyers, I can guide the buyers in the aspect of what are sellers going to be looking at when you give them an offer. So understanding that, again, what the market is doing, and we're going back to that scenario where we know that there are multiple offers, we're in a low inventory environment, and the seller has asked for the highest and best offer. So jumping in, here are some of the things that you can do to differentiate yourself. First thing, understand your position and how it may compare to any other offers out there. If the type of property that you're looking at is a move-in ready home and the expected buyer on that may be somebody that, you know, based on the size of the home, has a family or is going to be starting a family, you know, they're looking for something move-in ready where they don't need to do work. Understand what type of down payment that buyer might have. You know, is it a first-time buyer type of home? Is it a move-up, you know, buyer type of home? And how are you different than any potential buyer that may be interested in that type of home? If you're looking at a, you know, one-story ranch, you know, that could just as well be a first-time buyer type of home as well as somebody downsizing from a larger home and looking for one level living instead of moving into a condo. So why is that important? Well, somebody downsizing from a home that they've lived in for a long time may have built up quite a bit of equity, and they may be a cash buyer compared to somebody that's a first-time buyer. They're just trying to scrape by with a down payment. And so on paper, that's going to appear very differently to a seller when they're comparing those two specific offers. It's the cash offer can close quickly because I've paid off a house before, I'm taking that money and I'm going to be buying another house, versus the I'm a first time buyer, maybe I've got 5% down, I love your home, I want to buy it. So again, understanding the position that you're coming from versus any other competitors or competing offers in the market will be something that you really do need to know just to kind of get an idea of the chance that your offer may even be considered. If you are a first-time buyer, you're using an FHA loan, doing a minimum, we'll say 3.5% down payment or a 3% down payment, depending on the criteria at that given time, and you're competing with people that are with buyers that are submitting offers that are cash offers, you're at a disadvantage there. You need to understand that that may be perceived as a negative by the seller. So what else can you do in that perspective to help differentiate yourself? So again, framing your scenario, how you and your offer may stack up against other buyers in the market is going to be the key thing. And then from there is going to be things that you can do to differentiate your offer further. So one thing you could do is an escalation clause. You say, okay, what's an escalation clause? Well, an escalation clause is, you know what the home is worth to you. Well, let's say, for example, the home is listed at $500,000. Just using that number because it's easy and round. And let's say that you value that house at $500,000, but you really, really want this $500,000 house. We think it's worth $500,000 based on what the market's telling us, but you really want it and you don't want to lose it. So you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to give you $500,000 for your home, but I'm going to use this escalation clause, which says, if I am not the highest offer, I will offer X amount more than your best offer, up to a certain amount. So you might say, I will offer you $500,000, but if I'm not the best offer, again, I feel that the $500,000 is fair. If I'm not the best offer, I will offer you in $1,000 increments more above whatever your best offer is, but we need to see that offer. So if the seller gets an offer for $505,000 and you're using an escalation clause with a $1,000 escalation, you are saying, I will offer you $506,000, so long as you can prove to me that you have a $505,000 offer. With an escalation clause, you usually want to put in a cap, and so you'll say, I will offer you in $1,000 increments above your best offer, up to, let's just say, $510,000. So if the best offer the seller gets is $509,000, your escalation clause just pushed your offer up to $510,000, and that just happens to be the max that you're willing to pay for that house. Even though, again, you felt the home was a $500,000 home, you really wanted it, so you use that escalation clause to give yourself that little bit of a push above any potential offers that you might be competing with. If the seller gets an offer for $515,000, again, your escalation was capped at $510,000, and so you no longer are willing to pay above your cap, which is the way that you wrote your offer. Again, escalation clause, you need to be qualified to spend the amount of money that you're willing to, in terms of how high you're willing to escalate this, and be ready, if the seller does choose to use your, that escalation to get you to the first position, that you're ready to move forward with that house. So one negative or con on an escalation clause could be if the agent representing the sellers isn't familiar with how an escalation clause works, or they're not comfortable with it, they may not be able to explain to that seller the benefits of it and a buyer specifically using it. So if you're working with an agent, which I hope you're working with a good agent, guiding you through the process, they should be able to figure that out, whether that's something that would be accepted as an offer with an escalation clause, um, or if it just might confuse the seller or the seller's agent. So from there, the second thing that you could do to differentiate your offer could be you can offer to cover a low appraisal, cover the difference on an appraisal shortfall. Now this gets kind of tricky, so you want to pay attention to how the numbers work here. Again, we'll say it's a $500,000 house, and you're putting down 20% of that $500,000 house. So 20% is $100,000 you're putting down. So you're taking a $400,000 mortgage on a $500,000 home. And what you can do is you can offer to cover a low appraisal. So you'll say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, should the appraisal come in low, I will cover the difference by a certain amount of money. So you can say, well, if the home appraises for $495, again, we're offering $500,000, but if the home only appraises at $495, you're willing to cover the difference of that appraisal shortfall. So understand, your lender is giving you a certain percent loan to value. That's what they're assuming in terms of the loan that you're getting. So if the home only appraises at $495,000, they will only give you 80% of the $495. So not only do you need to cover you'll need to cover the difference of the 500 minus the 495, and again, come up with 20% of 495. Does that make sense? Feel free to message me if you want a little bit more detail on that specifically and how the numbers work on that. That's a big one. You just need to be ready to be able to spend the money should you get to that point. If you're a first-time buyer, you already have, you're in the position where you're having a tough time coming up with a down payment. You're just starting off. That might not be an option for you. If you only have 3 or 5% down payment and you don't have extra money to cover the difference, again, that might not be the right play for you. So just understanding your scenario and your positioning and using what you can is important in this scenario. So some minor things. What can you do that would be a minor change in your offer to help you appear more competitive compared to other offers? So in this scenario, again, Mr. and Mrs. Seller will say that they get 5 offers, and we'll say all 5 offers are at the exact same $500,000 price, and everybody's putting the same down payment. So what can you do to differentiate yourself in this scenario? Well, it's going to come down to what minor things in your offer can make you look like a stronger buyer. First thing could be earnest money. Earnest money, you say, what's that? Well, earnest money is your deposit that you put down with your offer. So you'll say, I am going to put down a certain amount of money as good faith that I'm going to move forward with this transaction, so long as I don't back out of it for any reason that's not protected in the offer. But going back to differentiating yourself with your earnest deposit, again, in this scenario, we had 5 buyers. Everybody was willing to pay $500,000 to Mr. and Mrs. Seller for their house, and they were all putting 20% down. So how did you differentiate yourself as a buyer? Well, for earnest deposit, let's just say that every other offer was willing to put down $5,000. So in this case, that's 1%. They're willing to put down $5,000 as their earnest deposit. And in the end, that deposit's going to go towards your closing costs and your down payment. So it's not like the seller sees any more or less of that money if you put down more or less of an earnest deposit. It's just money you're putting down as a deposit towards what you're going to be required to bring in terms of proceeds when you close on the home. So whether that amount is $5,000 or $100,000, it doesn't impact the seller's bottom line. But structuring your earnest in an amount that may seem stronger could be of value. So let's say, again, you're putting 20% down of $500,000, so you're putting $100,000 down. You may choose to make your earnest deposit $25,000. Again, so in that instance, the seller sees 5 offers and they say, well, this one person is putting down $5,000. Another offer is putting down $5,000 as earnest deposit, and then we got this last offer that's doing 25,000. Okay, well, they seem more confident, or maybe they're more financially, ready. Again, that one little thing may differentiate your offer versus everyone else. Different minor thing you can do is closing date. When are you willing to close, or how quickly are you willing to close on the home? Now, for the seller, they may not be interested in having a very quick closing. So you need to understand the seller's positioning in this. When I am a buyer's agent and I'm preparing an offer for buyers, I reach out to the seller's agent and I have a discussion with them. What is the seller's time frame? Where are they going? Do they need to buy a house? Are they moving out of state? Are they downsizing? Do they need the money from this specific home to go buy another home? Would a rent back benefit them? And a rent back is when you buy the home, you close on it, and then you agree to rent the home back to the seller for a certain period of time. So the home is yours and they are paying you rent for living in your home during that time frame. The benefit for the seller in that instance is they sell, they get their proceeds, from the sale of the home. They were able to pull their money out and then take that money to go spend it elsewhere. And that may be of value to a seller. So again, understanding when the seller wants to close. If the seller wants to get their home sold quickly so they can go make an offer on a home they've already found and they want to buy, they may be looking for the quickest closing date. Again, understanding the seller's positioning, you can do what you can to play to their interests and what's important to them. One other thing you can do is offer to buy the home as is. Now, what does as is mean? Well, again, I'm a realtor in Glenview, and I represent the Chicago land, the northwest suburbs, North Shore. So depending on your location where you're at, things may be approached a little differently. If you're in a different state, you want to familiarize yourself with the local contract and what that means. So buying as is, what does that mean? Well, that means you still have the right to do a home inspection, but you are telling Mr. and Mrs. Seller that you're doing the home inspection solely for your benefit. You're not going to go after them and ask them to make repairs or give you credits for things that you found during the inspection. You are stating, I'm going to do the inspection so I can be comfortable with the home, but I'm not going to come back to you and say, hey, I found this, it's broken, I want you to fix it. Hey, the roof is leaking or the furnace doesn't work, I want you to fix it. As is truly means that you are willing to take the home in the condition that it is. You have the option to do a home inspection. It doesn't mean you have to do one. Unless you're really familiar with homes and how they're built and how they're put together, I would highly encourage a home inspection even in an as-is purchase, so you know what you're getting into. So we've covered some of those minor things that you can do to differentiate yourself in a multiple offer situation. We've talked about your financial positioning and how it compares to other offers. We've talked about escalation clauses and how you can put in an offer that you feel is fair, but still be able to automatically have that offer increase should you not be the winning offer. We've talked about minor changes you can make. So things like the earnest deposit, things like the closing date and being able to appease to the seller with the date that you propose to close on. We talked about potentially renting back and also about buying as is. So we've gone through that. One other thing that you may want to consider, especially when you're first getting started, is who is on your team. So you're looking to buy a home, who are you working with? And you say, Paul, well, of course, you're an agent, we should be working with you. My point here is not that, it's the people that you're working with, do you have a strong team? So your lender, is your lender responsive? Are they able to close quickly, and are they on top of the whole process when they're preparing your loan or your loan application and getting you through the process to get to closing? Why is that important? Well, again, I work with sellers and buyers. And so on the seller side, when I'm working with a multiple offer situation and we have some offers that are very similar, I'm looking for what can differentiate the different offers that we have. And so one of the things that I look at is, who's the lender? Am I familiar with them? Are they responsive? If I call them to verify your pre-approval, do they pick up the phone? Do they call me back? Do I have to wait 24 hours to hear from them? If that's the case on offer A, is their lender doesn't call me back to let me know, hey, I've looked at this specific buyer scenario, I verified their documents, I've run their credit, they're golden, they're good to go. If I don't get that from this lender, but lender B is somebody that's local and maybe I've worked with them before, or I know that they've got a reputation to always be able to close on time or do what they can in their power to be able to keep things closing on time, that's a differentiating factor, right? I know that lender A is going to be difficult to work with, and they may delay this process. And lender B, again, if I'm familiar with them or just by talking to them, I get an idea that they're staying on top of things. That's going to differentiate buyer B and their offer versus buyer A. And sometimes the buyer doesn't even think about that. Well, okay, talk to this lender, they're giving me the best deal. I'm going to go with them. But from the seller's perspective and their agent, when they call that lender and that lender is not responding to them, that's not going to help you. If that lender is from some online lending company and that lender happens to be, 3 time zones away, and they're just not very responsive, or they don't understand the local mortgage market, that's not going to make the process easier. And again, when you're trying to win in a multiple offer situation, you want to be perceived as the best potential candidate for that home. So that's the lender. How about your agent? Again, we're assuming that you're working with a great agent, but what if you're not? What if you're working with an agent that, from my perspective, if I'm working with a seller and I've got a buyer's agent that I know tends to try to pull something tricky, often, or if I've worked with them before and they just weren't a straight shooter, we'll say that they try to bid up the price, make sure that their buyer gets it, and then when we get to inspection, the buyer's asking, for a ton of money or a ton of repairs, that they just didn't do a good job of guiding their specific buyer through that process. That I know, if I've worked with that specific agent and I know that they're challenging, that's not going to help that agent or that agent's buyer win, especially if there's 2 offers that are very similar. If I've got, again, one offer where I know the agent's going to be a pain to work with, and I've got another offer and I know the agent and they're responsive, if I need something, they are emailing me or calling me or texting me, as soon as I need it. I know that, in an inspection, if something comes up, they're going to guide their buyer through to have that buyer truly understand what is worthwhile to ask for, what is, a minor detail that, again, it may cost a little bit, but it may not be worthwhile to ask, especially knowing that a home is in a multiple offer. So if I've got that agent that I know is going to be on top of things, that's going to be in the favor of that specific buyer. Is the agent that buyer chose to work with carries some weight in terms of me trusting that their buyer is going to be able to do what they say, which is close when they say they're going to close, get a mortgage when they say they're going to be able to get a mortgage. So there is a lot of value in the agent that you're working with. So think through your team wisely. If you're considering jumping in the home buying market and you haven't started yet and you need a good agent, maybe it's not an area that I serve, message me. I'm happy to connect you with an agent, whether that's in Illinois, in a market that I don't work with, or anywhere, in the U.S. I've got a huge network of agents that I can filter and I can talk to make sure that they're going to be a good fit for you, and I'm happy to make that referral. So lastly, in a multiple offer situation, if you are dealing with a market that is hot and you know that the prices, the buyers are going to be bidding up prices, the best thing you can do is don't go in with a low ball offer thinking that you're going to have room to come up. Understand your local market. If homes are selling very close to asking price or over, don't be the offer that's going to come across as weak on paper, because I'm going to offer you $450 on your $500,000 house, and I'm going to raise my offer to $475 or $480. I'm going to give myself that room. Understand that that first offer you make, if it doesn't seem realistic, or everybody else came in very, very close to asking price, and you were the one offer that came in low, you just started off on the wrong foot with that specific seller and their agent. And even if you do end up coming in, the same ballpark as everybody else when they call for highest and best offer on a multiple offer situation, again, you may not be perceived as the most serious, competent buyer for this specific scenario. So I hope that was helpful. These are just a few of so many different approaches that we take in working through a multiple offer situation. Every situation is different. The way we approach every single one is going to vary depending on who the seller is and what's important to them. If the seller is an investor, we're going to look at that differently than if the seller is somebody who's lived in the home for 30 or 40 years and they're looking to sell their long-time home. It's a different approach to those two different sellers. So understand the market that you're in and know as much as you can about the party that you're working in this case against in a negotiation, to be able to try to work with them to put the offer together in your favor. So again, Paul Jentrick here to help you if you're looking to buy or sell in the northwest side of Chicago, the northwest suburbs, or the North Shore. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, questions, comments, let me know. Best of luck to you in your multiple offer situation should it come to it.